The mud tasted like copper and rotten leaves. I was face down in it, my helmet strap choking me, while tracers snapped through the bamboo 3 inches above my head. It was February 1945, somewhere deep in the Caraballo Mountains on Luzon, the Philippines. The air didn't just smell of gunpowder, it smelled of sulfur and wet, decaying earth. I could hear the distinct high-pitched crack of the Japanese Arisaka rifles answering the deeper thud of our M1 Garands. But the loudest sound wasn't the gunfire. It was the sound of my own heart hammering against my ribs, threatening to crack them open. I wasn't panicked because we were under attack. That was just Tuesday in the Pacific. I was panicked because I knew exactly why the attack had started. I knew why the enemy had opened fire prematurely. I knew why my squad was pinned down but still alive. It wasn't because of our superior tactics. It wasn't because of our perimeter defense. It was because 20 seconds ago, while sitting in a foxhole tasked with the lives of 12 men, I had let my eyes close. I had drifted off, and I had let out a snore so loud it startled a Japanese infiltrator into pulling his trigger too soon. They tell you that in war, silence is your best friend. They drill it into you in boot camp. Silence means concealment. Silence means discipline. Silence means life. But that night, in a soaking wet foxhole on the edge of a godforsaken ridge, silence was the enemy. The silence was the trap. If that Japanese soldier hadn't heard me saw a log, if he hadn't been so spooked by the sudden guttural noise erupting from the darkness that he fired blindly into the dirt, his squad would have been inside our perimeter with knives before we even knew they were there. I should have been court-martialed. I should have been shot for dereliction of duty. Instead, I was scrambling for my rifle, wiping mud from the receiver, realizing that my incompetence had just bought us the only thing that matters in a jungle ambush: time. We had been on the line for 3 weeks straight. You have to understand what that does to a man's mind. It's not just being tired. Tired is what you feel after a double shift at the factory. This was something else. This was a biological dismantling of the human spirit. We were rotting from the feet up. My boots hadn't been dry since January. We called it jungle rot, but it felt like your skin was just giving up on holding you together. I was a sergeant, barely 22 years old, leading a squad of replacements who looked at me like I was their father, even though I was only 2 years older than most of them. We were pushing toward the Cagayan Valley, trying to flush out General Yamashita's forces. The intelligence reports, always written by guys sitting in air-conditioned tents in Manila, said the resistance in this sector was light to moderate. That's the first thing you learn. The map is not the territory, and the report is not the reality. Light resistance usually meant you were only going to get shot at by mortars and snipers, not artillery. But out here, the jungle swallowed sound and light. You couldn't see 5 feet in front of you once the sun dropped. The darkness was heavy. It had weight. It pressed against your eyeballs. That night, it was my turn on watch. Eero 200 to 0400. The graveyard shift. The worst shift. The rest of the guys, Miller, Kowalski, the new kid we just called Tex because he wore a cowboy hat until the lieutenant made him burn it, were asleep in the mud behind me. My job was simple. Stare into the black void, listen for the snap of a twig, and don't fall asleep. The penalty for sleeping on guard duty in a combat zone is death. It's Article 113 of the Articles of War. Any sentinel who is found drunk or sleeping upon his post shall suffer death or such other punishment as a court-martial may direct. They read that to us until we could recite it backward. Back in Brooklyn, before the world caught fire, I worked for the Transit Authority. I wasn't a big shot. I was a track walker. My job was to walk the subway tunnels at night, looking for cracks in the rails, loose spikes, water leaks. I spent 3 years walking in the dark, listening to the drip of water and the hum of the third rail. I learned to listen to the silence. I learned that tunnels breathe. Air pressure changes when a train is coming miles away. You feel it in your ears before you hear the rumble. I thought that job made me uniquely qualified for this war. I thought I knew how to handle the dark. I thought I knew how to stay awake when the rest of the city slept. But the subway tunnels of New York don't have humidity that wraps around your lungs like a wet wool blanket. They don't have mosquitoes the size of dimes carrying malaria. And they don't have an enemy who believes that dying for the emperor is better than living with defeat. I was sitting on my helmet trying to keep my circulation going. I had rubbed tobacco juice in my eyes earlier, an old trick Kowalski taught me, to sting them open. It stopped working an hour ago. My head was heavy. It felt like it was filled with lead shot. I was looking at a patch of elephant grass that looked exactly like the patch of elephant grass next to it. I started counting. 1, 2, 3. I didn't decide to close my eyes. That's the scary part. You don't make a choice. Your body just shuts the power off. 1 second I was looking at the grass, and the next I was in my mother's kitchen on Flatbush Avenue. I could smell bacon. It was vivid. I could hear the radio playing. And then I let out a snort. A loud, ragged, ugly snort. The kind that wakes you up in a panic on a Sunday afternoon. That snort saved my life. If you're still listening to my story, I'd appreciate if you'd hit that like button and subscribe. It means these memories won't be forgotten. The sound ripped out of my throat, and my eyes snapped open. For a split second, I didn't know where I was. I thought I was back in the subway tunnel. Then the smell of the rotting jungle hit me. And then, the muzzle flash. It was close, maybe 10 yards. A brilliant orange flower blooming in the monochromatic dark. The crack of the rifle was deafening. The bullet didn't hit me. It hit the sandbag to my left with a sound like a heavy fist punching a pillow. I didn't think. I didn't verify the target. I rolled right, grabbing my Thompson submachine gun. The Thompson is a heavy beast, 11 pounds of wood and steel, but in that moment, it felt like a toy. I squeezed the trigger and walked a burst of .45 caliber rounds across the area where the flash had come from. The jungle erupted. It wasn't just one guy, it was a patrol, a heavy infiltration team. They had been creeping up on us, probably moving inches at a time for hours. They were known for that. They could move through dry leaves without making a sound. They were ghosts. They had likely been 10 feet away from me, knives out, ready to slip into the foxhole and slit our throats while we dreamed. They were waiting for the perfect moment to coordinate their strike. But ghosts don't expect the heavy breathing of a sleeping American sergeant to turn into a lawnmower noise. The point man, the one who fired, must have been so keyed up, so full of adrenaline, that the sudden snort hack from my foxhole startled him. He flinched. He pulled the trigger. He gave away the whole game. "Contact front!" I screamed, my voice cracking. "Tex! Kowalski, get up!" Grenades started flying. The Japanese Type 97 grenades have a fuse you have to strike against a hard object before throwing. I heard the click-hiss sounds before they landed. One landed just outside our hole. I kicked Tex, who was thrashing in his poncho, and we scrambled deeper into the mud. The explosion shook the ground, raining dirt and shrapnel over us. My ears were ringing, a high-pitched whine that drowned out everything else. "What did you see, Frank? What did you see?" Kowalski was yelling, already on the bar, Browning automatic rifle. "They're right on top of us!" I yelled back. I couldn't tell him. I couldn't tell him I didn't see anything because I was dreaming of bacon. I just pointed my Thompson into the green wall and fired short bursts. The firefight lasted maybe 10 minutes, but it felt like 10 years. The Japanese were aggressive. They charged the line, screaming, "Banzai!" It's a terrifying sound. A human voice pushed past the limit of sanity. I saw a shape emerge from the gloom, a silhouette with a bayonet. Kowalski saw him too. The bar chugged. Chung, 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 chung. A slow, heavy rhythm that tore through the brush and the man. He dropped like a marionette with cut strings. We were lucky. We had established a grazing fire plan earlier that evening. We had interlocking fields of fire. Once everyone was awake, and believe me, everyone was awake now, we poured lead into the kill zone. The infiltrators were caught in the open, their element of surprise ruined by my sinuses. They couldn't move forward into the wall of fire, and they couldn't retreat without getting cut down. When the shooting stopped, the silence that rushed back in was heavier than before. It was ringing silence. The smell of cordite was choking. I was shaking. My hands were vibrating so hard I couldn't change the magazine on my Thompson. I had to brace it against my knee. "Check in!" I called out. "Sound off. Miller's good. Tex is good. Took a piece of rock in the cheek, but I'm good. Kowalski up. Barrel's hot." We hadn't lost a man. Not one. Morning came 3 hours later. The sun burned the mist off the jungle floor, revealing the carnage. There were 7 of them. 7 Japanese soldiers, fully equipped with satchel charges and grenades. They were lying in a semicircle around our position. The closest one, the one who had fired the first shot, was less than 15 feet from where I had been sitting. The lieutenant came down the line around 0700, Lieutenant Harrison. He was a good officer, a kid from Ohio who actually listened to his NCOs. He looked at the bodies. He looked at the satchel charges. He realized what had almost happened. If they had gotten those charges into our foxholes, the whole squad would have been vaporized. "Good work, Sullivan," Harrison said, lighting a cigarette. He offered me one. I took it, my fingers still stained with mud and gun oil. "Alertness. That's what saved you, boys. You must have heard them crawling." "Good ears, Sergeant." I stared at the cigarette. The smoke curled up into the humid air. I looked at Kowalski. He was cleaning his bar, looking at me with a strange expression. He slept light. He knew. He had to know. He was lying right behind me. "Yes, sir," I lied. "Heard a twig snap." Just a tiny snap. Reacted on instinct. Harrison nodded, slapped me on the shoulder, and moved down the line to check on the next position. I stood there, smoking the lieutenant's cigarette, feeling a wave of nausea roll over me. I felt like a fraud. I felt like a criminal. I was a hero because I failed. Kowalski walked over. He was a big man, a former steelworker from Pittsburgh. He had hands like shovels and a face that looked like it had been carved out of granite. He stopped next to me and looked at the dead Japanese soldier closest to us. "Twig snap, huh?" Kowalski grunted. He didn't look at me. "Yeah," I said, staring at the ground. "Funny," Kowalski said. "Sounded like a bear choking on a chicken bone to me." My heart stopped. I looked up at him. He took a drag of his own cigarette and exhaled slowly. "You were out, Frank," he said. It wasn't an accusation. It was just a statement of fact. "I was just about to kick your boot to wake you up when you let out that snore. Scared the hell out of me. Scared the hell out of Tojo there, too. I started to stammer, to explain, to beg him not to report me. Kowalski held up a hand. "Save it. We're alive. That's the only math that works out here. You got lucky. We all got lucky. But don't let it happen again. Next time, they won't spook. Next time, they'll just cut your throat." He walked away, back to his foxhole. I stood there for a long time, looking at the jungle, the green wall that hid everything. I realized then that the war wasn't about being perfect. It wasn't about the manual. It was about chaos. It was about the random roll of the dice. A snore, a stumble, a jam in a rifle. That's what decided who went home to Brooklyn and who stayed in the mud forever. That moment changed how I led. I stopped trusting the doctrine. I stopped trusting the rules. I started trusting the reality of the men in front of me. I realized that everyone has a breaking point. I had found mine that night. I had hit the wall of exhaustion and crashed. From that night on, I changed the watch schedule. No one did 2 hours alone anymore. We did 1-hour shifts, 2 men at a time. Buddy system. One watches the jungle, one watches the watcher. The lieutenant didn't like it, said it burned through the men's sleep time too fast. I told him I didn't care. I told him if he wanted to court-martial me, he could go ahead. But until then, my squad was doing it my way. He let it slide because we were winning, or at least we were surviving. But the irony of it, that's what stuck with me. The railroad inspector, the man trained to listen to the silence, saved by making the most unprofessional noise possible. It's a joke. A dark, twisted joke that only God or the devil could come up with. We moved out 2 days later. We pushed deeper into the WWII Pass. The terrain got worse. Vertical ridges, razor grass that sliced your uniforms and your skin, rain that felt like it was trying to wash the sins off the earth but never could. I remember a week later, we were pinned down again. This time it was daylight, a hidden machine gun nest in a cave mouth. We couldn't see it, but we could see what it was doing to the trees around us. Bark was exploding. Leaves were shredding. We were belly down in the mud. "Sullivan, we need a fix on that gun," Harrison yelled. I looked at the terrain. The manual says to flank, but the flank was a sheer drop-off. The other side was open ground. We were stuck. I looked at Tex. "Give me your helmet," I said. "What?" Tex asked, eyes wide. "Give me your damn helmet." I took his helmet. I took my own. I put them on the ends of our rifles. I looked at Kowalski. "When I lift these, you watch for the muzzle flash. They'll fire at the movement." "That's the oldest trick in the book, Frank," Kowalski said. "They won't fall for it." "They're tired too, Bull," I said. "Everyone's tired. Maybe they'll make a mistake, just like I did." I lifted the helmets. Crack, 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 crack. The Nambu machine gun opened up instantly. They took the bait. They were jumpy, just like that kid in the dark a week ago. "Got him!" Kowalski yelled. 2 o'clock, under the banyan tree roots. He opened up with the bar. The enemy gun went silent. We moved up. I realized then that the enemy wasn't a faceless monster. They were men. Tired, scared, jumpy men. They made mistakes. If you could force a mistake, you could win. My failure on guard duty had taught me that. It humanized the enemy for me, not in a sympathetic way, but in a tactical way. They weren't robots. They were biological machines that broke down just like we did. If you're still listening to my story, I'd appreciate if you'd hit that like button and subscribe. It means these memories won't be forgotten. We kept pushing north. The fighting for the Villa Verde Trail was some of the worst of the Pacific War. It wasn't big unit maneuvers like in Europe. It was a knife fight in a phone booth. We measured progress in yards. Sometimes we'd fight all day for a single hill, lose 3 guys, take the hill, and then get ordered to pull back at night because the line was too thin. Then we'd have to take the same damn hill again the next morning. I remember one specific morning. It was March now. We were running low on everything. Ammo, food, water. Morale was in the toilet. We came across a village, or what used to be a village, just scorched earth and bamboo skeletons. We were sweeping through, checking for stragglers. I entered a small hut that was still half standing. My finger was on the trigger of the Thompson. The shadows played tricks on you. I saw movement in the corner. I swung the barrel, ready to fire. "Don't shoot!" It wasn't English. It was a whimper, a universal sound. I held my fire. My eyes adjusted. It was a woman, a Filipino civilian. She was huddled in the corner, clutching a bundle of rags. She looked at me with eyes that had seen the end of the world. She was starving. I could see the bones of her face pushing against her skin. I lowered the gun. "It's okay," I said softly. "American. Friends." She didn't move. She didn't trust me. Why should she? Men with guns had been destroying her life for years. Then the bundle of rags moved. A baby. Tiny. Couldn't have been more than a few months old. The baby started to cry. It was a weak, thin cry. The sound of hunger. I reached into my webbing and pulled out a K-ration tin. Cheese. It wasn't much. I tossed it gently toward her. She flinched, thinking it was a grenade. When it landed and didn't explode, she looked at it, then at me. She grabbed it like it was gold. I stood there for a moment, watching her struggle to open the tin with trembling hands. I stepped forward to help. She recoiled. Okay, I said, backing off. I pulled out my trench knife, opened a can of peaches I had been saving for a special occasion, like my birthday or the end of the war, and placed it on the floor. I backed out of the hut. As I walked back into the sunlight, Kowalski was waiting. "Clear?" he asked. "Clear," I said. "Just civilians." "Did you check the root cellar?" he asked. "They like to hide in the root cellars." I hadn't checked the root cellar. I hadn't checked anything. I just saw the mother and the baby. "Yeah," I lied again. "Checked it. Empty." Kowalski looked at me. He knew I was lying. He always knew, but he didn't say anything. He just nodded and spat a stream of tobacco juice onto the scorched earth. "Let's move." I think about that lie too. The lie about the guard duty. The lie about the hut. In war, truth is a luxury you can't always afford. Sometimes the lie is what keeps you human. If I had checked that cellar properly, maybe I would have found a weapon stash. Maybe I would have found an enemy soldier hiding behind the woman. Maybe I would have had to kill him in front of her. Maybe the baby would have been caught in the crossfire. I chose the risk. I chose to be a bad soldier, to be a decent human being for 5 seconds. And I lived with the fear that my choice could hurt my squad. That's the burden. It's not just the killing. It's the choices. The gamble. You bet with other people's lives every time you make a decision. By April, the division was exhausted. We were skeletons walking in green fatigues. I had lost 20 pounds. My uniform hung off me like a scarecrow's clothes. But we were winning. We were grinding them down. The end of the war for me didn't come with a parade. It came with a mortar round. We were setting up a perimeter near a river crossing. It was a lazy afternoon. The sun was hot. I was cleaning my Thompson again. The jungle humidity rusted metal overnight if you didn't stay on top of it. I heard the thump in the distance. Mortars are tricky. You don't hear them coming like artillery. No whistle. Just the launch and then the arrival. Thump. "Incoming!" I yelled, diving for a depression in the ground. The round landed about 30 yards away. Not close enough to kill, but close enough to throw dirt. Then the second one. Closer. They were walking them in. They had a spotter. "Tex, get the radio. Call for counter battery." I looked up to see where Tex was. He was running toward the radio, his helmet bouncing on his head. The third round hit. It hit the tree right above me. An air burst. The world went white. I didn't feel pain. I just felt a massive shove, like a giant hand swatted me into the dirt. My ears popped. The silence returned. That same ringing silence from the night I fell asleep. I tried to get up, but my legs wouldn't work. I looked down. My right leg was a mess. Shrapnel. Blood was soaking through the fabric, turning the green into black. "Sarge is hit. Medic." It was Kowalski's voice. He was there in a second, dragging me by my webbing, pulling me behind a fallen log. He ripped open a packet of sulfa powder and dumped it into the wound. That hurt. That brought the pain. It felt like liquid fire. "You're okay, Frank. You're okay," Kowalski was saying, but his eyes were wide. He was working fast, wrapping the bandage tight. Too tight. "Bull," I wheezed. "The radio. Tex got it. Artillery is on the way. Just breathe, you dumb bastard. Just breathe." I looked up at the canopy. The leaves were bright green against the blue sky. It was beautiful. Strange that I noticed that. I was bleeding out in the mud, and all I could think about was how green the leaves were. They evacuated me on a Jeep stretcher. The ride back to the aid station was bumpy. Every bump was agony. But I was alive. I spent 3 months in a hospital in Hawaii. Then they shipped me back to San Francisco. I had a cane. I had a Purple Heart. And I had a story I couldn't tell anyone. When I got back to Brooklyn, the neighborhood threw a block party. There were banners. "Welcome home, Frank," my mom cried. My dad shook my hand and didn't say much. He was a WWII vet. He knew. People asked me what it was like. "Did you kill any Japs? Was it like the movies?" "You're a hero, Frank." I just smiled and said, "We did what we had to do." I couldn't tell them. I couldn't tell them that the defining moment of my war, the moment that saved my squad, was me falling asleep on the job. I couldn't tell them about the lie in the hut. I couldn't tell them that I wasn't a hero. I was just a guy who got lucky. I went back to work for the transit authority, but I couldn't do the tunnels anymore. The silence down there. It was too much. It reminded me of the jungle. I took a desk job, dispatcher, noisy room, phones ringing, people yelling. I liked the noise. I needed the noise. I never saw Kowalski again. I heard he made it back to Pittsburgh, went back to the steel mills. I hope he did. I hope he found some peace. He was the best soldier I ever knew, because he knew when to follow the rules and when to look the other way. I'm telling this now because I'm an old man. My leg still aches when it rains. The cane is gone, but the limp is there. I look at the news, I look at the world, and I see people talking about war like it's a video game, like it's clean, like it's about good guys and bad guys and following orders. It's not. It's about mud and fear and accidents. It's about the human element, the flaws. I want you to know that sometimes your biggest mistake can be your salvation. Sometimes your weakness is the only thing that keeps you alive. I shouldn't be here. By the book, I should be dead. By the book, my squad should be dead. But the book doesn't account for a kid from Brooklyn snoring in the face of death. That's what I carry with me. The knowledge that life is fragile and ridiculous. We draw lines on maps, we write rules in manuals. But in the end, we're just biological machines trying to survive the night. I forgive myself now. It took 40 years. But I forgive myself for falling asleep. Because if I hadn't, I wouldn't be sitting here. And neither would 12 other men's grandchildren. That's the story. That's the truth. No heroics. Just a snore in the dark. If you made it this far, thank you for listening. This is Frank Sullivan, signing off. I thought I was done. I thought telling you about the snoring incident would be enough to clear the air, to let the pressure out of the valve. But as soon as I put the microphone down, the room got quiet again. And in that quiet, the other memories started scratching at the door. The ones I don't talk about at parties. The ones that don't have a funny twist or a stroke of luck. The ones that are just grit, blood, and the awful mathematics of attrition. You can't understand the Pacific War just by hearing about the time I got lucky. You have to understand the Villa Verde Trail. You have to understand what it means to fight for a road that isn't really a road, just a muddy scar cut into the side of a mountain that climbs into the clouds. We called it the Little Burma Road, but that was too poetic. It was a chute, a 20-mile chute of red clay, vertical drops, and Japanese pillboxes buried so deep in the earth they survived napalm, artillery, and naval gunfire. We weren't fighting for a city. We were fighting for elevation. Every knob, every ridge, every turn in the trail had to be paid for. And the currency was us. It was mid-March 1945. The rainy season wasn't supposed to be hitting us this hard, but the skies over Luzon didn't care about the calendar. The rain didn't fall. It was driven horizontally by winds that could peel the poncho right off your back. I remember the sound of it. Not a soothing patter, but a relentless, drumming roar against the helmet that made it impossible to hear orders. It turned the clay into grease. You'd take 2 steps forward, slide 1 step back. And if you slipped the wrong way, you fell 2,000 feet into the green canopy below. We lost men that way. No enemy fire. Just gravity and mud. We were stalled at a switchback we called Norton's Knob, named after the first lieutenant who died trying to take it. It was a sharp turn in the trail, dominated by a ridge honeycombed with caves. The Japanese had a Type 1 47mm anti-tank gun up there, along with heavy machine guns. They had zeroed every inch of the trail. We couldn't bring tanks up. The mud was too deep, the trail too narrow. It was infantry work. Pure, miserable infantry work. My squad was down to 8 effective men. Tex was still with us, bandage on his cheek turning gray with grime. Kowalski was carrying the bar, but he looked hollowed out. The skin around his eyes was dark, bruised-looking. We hadn't had a hot meal in 6 days. We were living on cold sea rations and rainwater. "Sarge, we can't go up that gut again," Tex said to me. We were huddled behind an outcropping of rock, water streaming off our helmets like waterfalls. They got it dialed in. It's suicide. He was right. A frontal assault was death. But the captain, Captain Miller, a man who led from the rear and loved his maps more than his men, had sent the runner down. The order was to secure the knob by 1400 hours. It was 1100. "We're not going up the gut," I said, wiping water from my eyes. "We're going up the face." Kowalski looked at me like I was insane. "The face? Frank, that's a 60-degree incline. It's sheer mud and rock." "Exactly," I said. "They're watching the trail. They're watching the switchback. They aren't watching the cliff directly underneath them because they think nobody is stupid enough to climb it. I wasn't sure if it would work." Layer 2, the strategic context, told us that standard doctrine was to suppress with mortars and flank. But we had no mortars. The tubes were out of ammo, stuck on a supply truck 5 miles back in the mud, and there was no flank, just the cliff. My civilian skill of thinking differently wasn't about being smart, it was about being desperate. In the subway tunnels, if a passage was blocked, you found a vent. You found a crawl space. You didn't just stand there and wait to get hit by a train. "Drop the packs," I ordered. "Take ammo, grenades, and knives. Rifles slung tight. We climb." The climb took us 2 hours. 2 hours to move 300 yards vertically. It was agony. We were clawing into the mud with our fingernails, pulling ourselves up by exposed roots that tore our hands open. I could hear the Japanese talking above us. That's how close we were. I could smell the smoke of their cooking fires, fish and rice. It was a bizarre, domestic smell, mixed with the stench of our own unwashed bodies. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it would vibrate right through my ribs against the rock. One slip, one loose rock tumbling down, and they'd just roll grenades over the edge and wipe us out. I looked down once. Bad idea. The jungle floor was a swirling mist of green and gray. I saw Miller, not the captain, but our Miller, the private, struggling with his footing. I reached down and grabbed his webbing, hauling him up. His eyes were wide, white circles in a mask of mud. He mouthed, "Thank you." I just nodded and pointed up. We crested the ridge at 1315. We were directly behind their main bunker. The rain masked our sound. They were so focused on the trail below, waiting for the American attack they knew was coming, they never looked back. I signaled Kowalski. He moved to the left, setting up his bar. Tex and I moved to the right. We had to hit them all at once. If we didn't, the crossfire from the supporting spider holes would cut us to ribbons. I pulled the pin on a fragmentation grenade. I didn't release the spoon. I held it, feeling the cold steel. I counted to 3 in my head. "Now!" I screamed. We threw 4 grenades simultaneously. They arced through the rain and dropped right into the firing slit of the log bunker and the trench line behind it. The explosions were muffled by the earth and logs, a dull crump, 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 crump that shook the ground under our feet. Smoke poured out of the bunker. "Go! Go! Go!" We went over the top. It was brutal. It was fast. The Japanese survivors were stunned, scrambling for weapons. Kowalski's bar roared, cutting down 2 men who tried to charge us. I saw an officer, sword out, screaming orders. I didn't hesitate. I put 2 rounds from my Thompson into his chest. He fell backward into the mud, the sword sliding from his hand. It was over in 90 seconds. We had taken the knob. We had opened the road. But the cost, it wasn't physical this time. It was what happened right after. We were clearing the spider holes, single man pits camouflaged with grass lids. You had to be careful. Sometimes they played dead. Sometimes they had a grenade clutched to their chest. Tex was checking a hole near the edge of the cliff. He lifted the lid with his bayonet. "Clear!" he yelled. Then a shot rang out. Tex spun around, a look of total surprise on his face. He dropped to his knees, then fell forward into the mud. "Medic!" I screamed, running to him. The shot had come from a dead body in the trench, a wounded Japanese soldier we had bypassed. He had propped himself up and fired one last round. Kowalski finished him before I even reached Tex. I rolled Tex over. The bullet had hit him in the neck, the artery. The blood was bright red, pumping in rhythm with his failing heart. It mixed with the rain and the mud, creating a horrific slurry. "Sarge," he gurgled. He tried to speak. He tried to say something. "Don't talk, Tex. Don't talk. We got you." I pressed my hands against his neck, trying to seal the hole. It was like trying to hold back a garden hose. The pressure was immense. His eyes were locked on mine. They weren't scared anymore. They were just fading. The light was going out. "My hat," he whispered. "Tell him." I kept the hat. And then he was gone. Just like that. The kid who made us laugh, the kid who loved cowboy movies, the kid who shouldn't have been there. He was just meat in the mud. I sat there in the rain. holding his body, my hands covered in his blood. I didn't cry. You don't cry in the middle of it. You can't. If you start crying, you stop thinking. And if you stop thinking, you die. I just felt a cold, hard knot form in my stomach. A knot of rage. A knot of guilt. Why did I choose the cliff? If we had gone up the trail, maybe the mortars would have arrived. Maybe the tanks would have pushed through. Maybe Tex would still be alive. My brilliant tactical decision had worked, but it had cost me one of my boys. That's the equation you can never balance. Was the objective worth his life? The colonel would say yes. The map would say yes. But looking at his gray face in the rain, I said no. If you're still listening to my story, I'd appreciate if you'd hit that like button and subscribe. It means these memories won't be forgotten. We held Norton's Knob for 3 days. The Japanese counterattacked every night. They came in waves, screaming, throwing satchel charges. We were cut off. No resupply. We used Japanese grenades because we ran out of ours. We ate their rice because we had no food. We became animals. I remember the second night specifically. It was the darkest night I've ever seen. No moon, no stars, just the black void. I was in a foxhole with Kowalski. We were back to back. "You think we're getting off this rock, Frank?" Kowalski asked. His voice was raspy. "Yeah," I said, "we're walking out of here." "I don't think so," he said. "I got a feeling, like when the steel is about to snap. You hear the ping before it goes." "Shut up, Bull, you're just hungry." "Maybe," he said. "But if I don't, you go see my sister. In Pittsburgh. You tell her I didn't suffer. You lie to her, Frank. You promise me." "I promise," I said. "But you're telling her yourself." That conversation haunts me, because in war, men get premonitions. It's spooky. It's like the soul knows before the body does. The next morning, the relief column finally broke through. Tanks. Beautiful, loud, smelly Sherman tanks. They clanked up the trail, their 75mm guns blasting the remaining caves. We were saved. We walked down the trail, passing the fresh troops moving up. They looked clean. Their uniforms were green, not black with rot. They looked at us like we were ghosts. And maybe we were. We had the 1,000-yard stare. I've seen the pictures later. Eyes that look through you, not at you. Eyes that have seen too much death to focus on the living. We were pulled off the line for R&R in a rear area. But rest is a relative term. You don't rest, you just wait. You clean your gear. You drink bad beer. You write letters you hope you won't have to finish. I wrote to Tex's parents. It took me 3 days to write 2 paragraphs. What do you say? Your son died taking a muddy bump on a map? He died because I ordered him to climb a cliff? No. You write the standard lie. He died a hero, he didn't suffer, he was loved by his squad. I signed it, Sergeant Frank Sullivan. I sealed it. I felt like I was sealing away a piece of my own soul. Layer 3, the backstory, is important here. See, back in Brooklyn, my father was a hard man. He didn't believe in complaining. He came back from France in 1919 with shrapnel in his hip and lungs burned by mustard gas, but he never talked about it. He just worked. He drank whiskey on Friday nights and stared at the wall. I used to hate that silence. I used to think he was just cold. After the Villa Verde Trail, I understood. The silence isn't emptiness, it's a dam. It's holding back a flood of screaming memories. If you open your mouth to talk about it, really talk about it, the dam might break, and you might drown everyone around you. So you stay silent. You drink the whiskey. You stare at the wall. We had a week of downtime before the final push. The rumors were flying. We were going to invade Japan proper. Operation Downfall. Everyone knew the estimates. 1 million American casualties. We did the math. 8 men left in my squad. If we hit the beaches of Kyushu, 0 would come home. That waiting period was worse than the combat. It's the anticipation of the executioner. You sit there polishing your rifle, knowing that this piece of wood and steel is the only thing standing between you and eternity. I tried to keep the men busy. Drills, inspections, anything to keep their minds off the future. But you could see it in their eyes. The fear. Not the sharp adrenaline fear of combat, but the slow, corrosive dread. One night, a new replacement came up to me. Kid named Rossi. Looked about 18. "Sarge," he said, shifting his weight, "is it true? About the suicide bombers? The civilians?" He had heard the stories from Okinawa. Women and children blowing themselves up. "Listen to me, Rossi," I said, putting a hand on his shoulder. "Don't fight the war before you get there. You focus on your job. You focus on the man next to you. You let the generals worry about the civilians. You keep your head down and your eyes open. That's how you survive." I was giving him advice I wasn't sure I believed anymore. But that's the job of an NCO. You sell hope, even when you're fresh out of stock. We got the orders to move out in late April. We weren't going to Japan yet. We had to clear the Cagayan Valley first. The breadbasket of Luzon. Yamashita had 50,000 men dug in there. The valley was different from the mountains. It was flat, open country, tall grass, heat that shimmered off the ground. It was tank country. We rode on the backs of Shermans, dust coating our throats. It felt like a different war. It felt like the newsreels from Europe. But the Japanese were still the same. They didn't surrender. They dug spider holes in the middle of open fields. They strapped explosives to bamboo poles and ran at the tanks. We called them lunge mines. I remember one afternoon, we were moving through a kogan grass field. The grass was 7 feet tall. You couldn't see anything. The tanks were blind. We were walking ahead of them, acting as eyes. I heard a rustle, not the wind. "Hold up," I signaled. The grass parted. A Japanese soldier charged out, holding a lunge mine. He wasn't screaming, he was silent. His face was a mask of grim determination. He was aiming for the tracks of the lead tank. I didn't have time to aim. I fired from the hip. The Thompson bucked. The bullets hit him in the legs. He stumbled, but he kept crawling. He was trying to drag the mine to the tank. He was 5 feet away. Kowalski stepped forward and put a burst into him. The man stopped moving. The mine didn't go off. We stood there, looking at him. He was young, maybe younger than Rossi. He had a picture of a family tucked into his helmet band. I saw it when his helmet rolled off. A wife, a baby. I picked up the picture. I stared at it. "Put it back, Frank," Kowalski said softly. "Bad juju." I put it back. I looked at the tank crew. The commander was pale. He knew how close he had come to being cooked inside that steel hull. "Thanks, infantry," he said, his voice trembling over the radio. "Don't mention it," I muttered. That moment stuck with me. The fanaticism. The sheer will. How do you fight an enemy who wants to die? You don't defeat them. You accommodate them. You give them what they want. Death. It's a terrible, soul-crushing business. You become a machine of death to stop the machine of death. If you're still listening to my story, I'd appreciate if you'd hit that like button and subscribe. It means these memories won't be forgotten. The aftermath of that campaign was a blur. We secured the valley. The war in Europe ended in May. We heard about it on the radio. VE Day. People dancing in Times Square. We didn't dance. We were still killing people in the grass. It felt like we were on a different planet. The Forgotten War, they call it sometimes. It sure felt forgotten then. I want to talk about the silence again. After the war, when I was working that desk job, the silence would catch me off guard. I'd be sitting at home, reading the paper, and suddenly I'd be back in the kogan grass. I'd smell the diesel fumes. I'd see Tex's face. I think about the what-ifs. What if I hadn't fallen asleep that first night? What if I hadn't climbed the cliff? What if I had been the one to check the spider hole instead of Tex? Survivor's guilt isn't rational. It's not a legal indictment. It's a feeling. It's the weight of the empty chair at the table. It's the ghost that stands behind you in the mirror. For years, I didn't go to reunions. I didn't join the VFW. I just wanted to be Frank Sullivan. Dispatcher, not Frank Sullivan, Sergeant. But you can't outrun it. It's part of your DNA now. The war rewrote my code. I learned to appreciate the small things. A dry pair of socks, a hot cup of coffee, a quiet night without gunfire. These things are miracles. You people, the generation that came after, you worry about traffic or bills or the internet being slow. I get it. Those are real problems. But when I get stressed, I just touch my leg. I feel the scar tissue, and I remember the mud. And suddenly the traffic doesn't matter. There was one more incident I need to tell you about. It happened right before I got hit. We were sweeping a village. We found a schoolhouse. The Japanese had used it as a barracks. But on the chalkboard, written in perfect English, was a message. To the brave American soldiers, we will meet you in Tokyo. It was a taunt, but it was also a promise. It chilled me to the bone. It reminded me that we were fighting humans. Educated, thinking humans, not monsters. That makes it harder. Killing a monster is a public service. Killing a man who might have been a teacher or a poet, that takes a piece of you. I wiped the board clean. I don't know why. I just didn't want the other guys to see it. I wanted to erase their humanity so we could keep doing our job. That's another lie I lived. So, here we are. I've told you about the snoring. I've told you about the cliff. I've told you about the grass. These are the bricks that built the wall around my heart. But there's a crack in the wall now. Telling you this, it helps. It lets a little light in. I'm not a hero. Tex was a hero. The kid with the mine was a hero to his people. I'm just a witness. I'm the guy who survived to read the names. If you take anything from this, take this. War is not an adventure. It's a tragedy interrupted by moments of sheer absurdity. It's a snore in the dark saving your life. It's a boy dying for a hat. It's a message on a chalkboard. Cherish the peace. Cherish the silence. Because once you've heard the noise of battle, the silence is never truly silent again. This is Frank Sullivan. I'm going to go sit on my porch now. I'm going to watch the sun go down, and I'm going to try not to think about the mud. But I will. I always will. Thank you for listening.